Hey everybody, this is Richard Pierce. It's my pleasure to be with you here talking about writing assessment items. So this is the most important thing, or certainly one of the most important things you can do as an educator, assessing student learning through quality assessment items. The objectives of this presentation, I want you to be able to list what are the characteristics of good assessment items and be able to identify best practices for writing these assessment items. So what's a good question? What's a good test question? What's a good assessment item? One thing, like this Ferrari, good form. You can tell it when you look at it. You don't even have to read it. If the form is correct, that's a good start. This is not my opinion. This comes from a couple of key resources that you're able to download from this presentation, including how to prepare better multiple choice test items and the National Board of Medical Examiners constructing written test questions for the basic and clinical sciences. These are the Bibles. This is what you want to go to. The first reference, this has a lot of literature review for how these conclusions have been reached. Research basically on psychometrics of question types. Constructing written test questions, on the other hand, has a lot of examples that you will find very useful. Question templates where you can just plug your content into these questions, and they takes care of a lot of the issues surrounding question form. So let's talk about good form. Whether you're lifting weights, learning how to play tennis, learning an instrument, it doesn't matter. Form is essential. Good form is essential. So good form for questions looks like this. Long stem, short options. Your distractors should all be short. Should all be approximately the same size if you can get it. All the information required to answer the question should be in the stem. The opposite of that would be bad form, where you have a short stem and long options. You don't want the people, your students, getting bogged down in reading these long options. So a good format here, you've got a vignette, describes patient symptoms, recent exam results. You get to make your choice what the answer is. Again, these are all from the NBME document. Vignette, choices. Vignette, choices. And notice that these are relatively higher order thinking skills here. They give you, patient information, make you assess different things, whether they're going up or down or no change. There's some powerful cognition going on to answer these questions. More good examples. So there's no shortage of good examples on how to write up your questions as vignettes and provide good options. The NBME believes that vignettes are generally the most appropriate way to test this knowledge, and because they pose appropriate clinical challenges. In their guidelines, they have some tips for you. You want to focus on the important topics rather than trivial facts. Okay, what are you going to assess? That's critically important to start with that end in mind. Right? What are your test questions going to involve? What are the most clinically relevant aspects of your content? That's where you should start in developing your test questions and therefore planning your instructions. Can it be answered without looking at the options? You don't want to have tricky or overly complex stems or distractors. You want to avoid negative phrased things like except, not in the lead-in. Like all are true except, or all are false except. So in the event that you do have to use exclusionary language or negatively phrase things, you want to make sure that you clearly indicate that language. And here they've used italics. Some people will emphasize it with all caps, bold print, underline. All those are fair. In fact, you could do all of those. But avoid negatively phrased questions. So it's good to have 4 to 5 distractors, but if you can't think up 5 good ones, 4 good ones is better than 5 or 4 good ones and a bad one. Distractor performance is something we'll talk about as well, but 3 good choices is better than 4 choices where one of them is not realistic. So avoid the urge for artificial uniformity, like every question has to have five choices. Patients with pseudogout have pain always, frequently, usually, often, commonly, never. Right, so all kinds of bad habits here you want to avoid. Always and never. Avoid absolutes. And also avoid terms that have to be interpreted. Usually and often. Who knows what those really mean? Something else you need to be aware of is test wiseness. Grammatical cues. Absolute terms we just mentioned. Long correct answers, they're a problem. Repeats in the word, repeated words in the stem and options is also something you want to avoid. Irrelevant, difficulty, long, complicated options, inconsistent stating of numerical data is something you need to be aware of. Vague terms, all of the above or none of the above, you want to avoid those. And hinged responses, where answering one question provides hints to the answer of subsequent questions. You want to avoid that as well. So best practices include no true false, multiple choice with 4 or 5 good options. One correct answer is preferred, and you want to state your question in the positive form. K-type questions. Don't do them. They're not recommended. They've been removed from the licensure tests. The NAPLEX does not use them anymore. We should not use them. The NBME does not recommend them. Medical board doesn't have these type questions. They are psychometrically less reliable than a standard 4-question multiple choice, so don't use them. Please don't use them. So best practices: don't use K-type questions, avoid vague language, avoid absolutes, always avoid absolutes. If you have to negatively state something, go ahead and make sure that there's no doubt about what you're talking about by using caps, underline, bold, something like that. So good questions, big stems, same length distractors that are short, no absolutes or vague terms. Avoid item intimations. Item intimations include the hinged responses, repeated words in the stems, grammatical cues in a question, or an. Sometimes that can give away responses. So in summary, objectives for this lesson, you want to be able to understand what a good assessment item is. That it has good form. What are the aspects of good form? Stem length, distractor length, and the avoiding things like unnecessary information, overly complex things, K-type questions, absolute terms, vague terms. So hopefully this has provided some focus to you on how to write better assessment items, as well as provided those resources to you. You can download those, and I encourage you to take a look at those before you start planning your activities. So thank you.